Hey guys, tonight we are gently, so very gently, drifting back thousands of years to a land baked golden by an unforgiving sun, a civilization that flourished along the fertile banks of a life-giving river. You can almost feel the dry air on your skin, a stark contrast to the cool linen you might be wearing. The scent of exotic incense, perhaps a hint of lotus blossom mixed with the ever-present aroma of the Nile mud, hangs heavy. We're heading to ancient Egypt, a place of towering pyramids, enigmatic gods, and a surprisingly relatable human desire, the quest for a fresh smile. Though, if you were actually there, trying to navigate their version of oral hygiene, let's just say your modern sensibilities, and perhaps your gag reflex, might not last the morning. You'd probably be yearning for your minty fluoride paste before the first chariot rumbled past. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to see where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world, so feel free to drop that in the comments. It's always fascinating to see our little community of night owls and history whisperers. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine yourself, just for a moment, not in your comfortable bed, but lying on a woven reed mat, perhaps in a simple mud brick dwelling. The pre-dawn air is cooler now, a brief respite before the sun climbs high and asserts its dominion. The sounds are different here. No distant traffic hum, but perhaps the gentle lapping of water if you're near a canal, the braying of a donkey, the soft calls of early risers already beginning their day. You stretch, feeling the slight stiffness in your limbs, and your first conscious thought might just be about that. Well, that rather undivine taste in your mouth. This is ancient Egypt, a civilization that endured for millennia, a powerhouse of the ancient world. Their achievements in architecture, art, and governance are legendary. We all know the pyramids, the Sphinx, the dazzling gold of Tutankhamun. Mainstream historical fact: the civilization of ancient Egypt is one of the longest lasting in human history, spanning roughly from 3100 BC to its conquest by Alexander the Great in 332 BC. But beneath the grandeur, it was a place of everyday people, with everyday concerns. And one of those concerns, as it often is for us, was how to face the world, or at least your breakfast companion, without causing them to recoil. The quest for what we might generously call oral freshness was indeed a part of their lives. You see, the ancient Egyptians, for all their focus on the afterlife and pleasing the gods, were also quite preoccupied with their earthly appearance and personal hygiene, at least among the classes that could afford to be. Cleanliness was often equated with purity, both physical and spiritual. You'd find them bathing regularly, using natron, a naturally occurring salt mix, as a sort of soap, anointing themselves with fragrant oils. But the mouth was a special challenge. Let's not get ahead of ourselves with the specifics of their concoctions just yet. For now, just settle into this idea. You're in a world where the familiar comforts of your bathroom cabinet simply don't exist. No neatly squeezed tube of toothpaste, no brightly colored mouthwash, promising Arctic blasts. Instead, you have ingenuity born of necessity, and ingredients that might, shall we say, surprise you. Eyebrow raising is putting it mildly. Some of these ancient solutions to bad breath and dingy teeth would make a modern chemist blush, or perhaps just reach for a very large glass of water. It's interesting to think about what fresh breath even meant to them. Did they have the same aspirations for a minty tingle? Or was it more about neutralizing the truly offensive, rather than achieving a state of sparkling perfection? Scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the precise standards of beauty and hygiene in daily life, and how universally these were applied across different social strata. Some evidence suggests a desire for sweet-smelling breath, connecting it to attractiveness and even divine favor. After all, if you're going to be whispering sweet nothings to your beloved by the light of an oil lamp, or muttering prayers to Osiris, you probably don't want your breath to be a topic of divine or mortal complaint. You might also be surprised to learn that dental problems were rampant. We'll get into why their diet was a bit of a dental nightmare later on. But for now, just know that a throbbing toothache wasn't an uncommon experience. So, any attempt to clean the teeth, however, rudimentary, was probably also tied to a desperate hope of staving off pain and decay. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient Egyptian medical papyri contain spells and incantations specifically for toothaches, sometimes involving reciting magical words over a mixture to be applied to the tooth, suggesting a blend of practical and magical approaches to dental woes. Imagine lying there, a poultice of questionable herbs and minerals packed against your gum, fervently hoping that both the ingredients and the accompanying chant would do the trick. It's a far cry from a quick trip to the pharmacy for some. Clove oil, isn't it? So you're there, in this ancient land. The sun is beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of soft pink and orange. The air is still for now, but the day, with all its challenges, including that persistent film on your teeth, is dawning. The desire for a clean mouth, a pleasant interaction, is as old as civilization itself. And the ancient Egyptians, in their own unique, sometimes bewildering way, were determined to tackle it. The methods they devised, the ingredients they sourced from the earth, the river, and even, well, less savory places, form a fascinating, if occasionally wince-inducing chapter in the long story of human hygiene. We're just at the very beginning of uncovering what they thought would make their smiles shine, or at least not actively repel their neighbors. And believe me, some of it is quite the tale. You're now fully awake, the initial shock of that unique morning mouth feel a lingering memory. The desire for some kind of oral refreshment is strong. But before we even begin to rummage through the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a medicine cabinet for their peculiar tooth powders, we need to understand a fundamental truth, a gritty, pervasive reality that shaped their dental destiny more profoundly than any concoction ever could. We need to talk about their diet, specifically their daily bread, because what they ate, day in and day out, was the primary architect of their dental dread. It was, quite literally, a daily grind upon their teeth. The cornerstone of the ancient Egyptian diet, for rich and poor alike, was bread. Emmer wheat and barley were the staple grains, cultivated extensively in the fertile black land along the Nile. You'd see vast fields of these grains waving in the breeze, and the processes of harvesting, threshing, and grinding were central to daily life and the economy. Mainstream historical fact, bread and beer, both made from these grains, were not only dietary staples, but also used as forms of payment for laborers, including those who built the pyramids. So bread wasn't just food, it was currency, sustenance, life itself. But this life-giving bread came with a hidden abrasive cost. Imagine the scene of bread making. The harvested grain had to be threshed to separate the edible kernels from the chaff. Then came the crucial step, grinding. This was typically done by hand, often by women, using saddle querns, a large, slightly concave lower stone, and a smaller, upper rubbing stone. You'd kneel, rocking the upper stone back and forth, a laborious, repetitive motion, slowly pulverizing the grain into flour. It was hard work, a true daily grind. And here's the problem. These grinding stones, no matter how carefully chosen, would inevitably shed tiny particles of rock, sand, and grit into the flour. There was simply no way to avoid it with the technology of the time. So, every loaf of bread, every humble flatbread or hearty sourdough, contained a fine admixture of stone dust. It wasn't a deliberate addition, of course, but an unavoidable consequence of the milling process. You wouldn't necessarily see large chunks of rock in your bread, but a persistent, fine grit that was present in every bite. Think of it like eating at the beach and getting a bit of sand in your sandwich, except this was a daily, lifelong occurrence with nearly every meal. Quirky tidbit. Analysis of ancient Egyptian bread samples found in tombs has confirmed the presence of significant amounts of sand and stone particles, sometimes constituting a noticeable percentage of the bread's overall composition. You take a piece of this bread for your morning meal. It might be a simple, unleavened flatbread, quickly cooked on a hot stone or in the embers of a fire, or perhaps a slightly more refined, leavened loaf if your household could manage it. As you chew, you can feel it. That subtle, inescapable grittiness. It's not overwhelmingly sandy, not like a mouthful of desert, but it's there, a constant abrasive presence. With every bite, every grinding motion of your molars, these tiny mineral particles are working away at your tooth enamel, like exceptionally fine sandpaper. Day after day, year after year, this relentless abrasion took its toll. Your teeth, designed for chewing, were subjected to an unnaturally high level of wear. The cusps of your molars, those little peaks and valleys that help with efficient grinding, would gradually wear down, becoming flatter and flatter. This process, known as dental attrition, was universal in ancient Egypt. It didn't matter if you were a farmer, a scribe, a priest, or even a pharaoh. If you ate bread, your teeth were being slowly but surely ground away. The extent and speed of this wear is still a subject of detailed study by bioarchaeologists who examine tooth wear patterns to understand diet and food processing techniques in different periods and social groups. This constant wear had several unfortunate consequences beyond just flattened teeth. As the hard outer enamel wore away, the softer dentin underneath would become exposed. Dentin is more porous and sensitive than enamel, and its exposure could lead to increased tooth sensitivity to hot, cold, or sweet foods. Though refined sugar as we know it was not a major part of their diet, honey and sweet fruits were. More critically, the worn surfaces and the micro scratches created by the grit could provide more nooks and crannies for food particles and bacteria to lodge, potentially increasing the risk of decay, despite the abrasive nature of the food. Paradoxically, scrubbing some surfaces, and it wasn't just bread. Other elements of their diet could contribute, though bread was the main offender. Some methods of food preparation might inadvertently introduce more grit. Vegetables grown in the silty Nile soil, if not washed with extreme thoroughness, could retain fine particles. Dried fish, another common food, might also pick up sand during the drying process. So, while you might enjoy a meal of bread, some lentils, a few dates, and perhaps a piece of dried fish, you were unknowingly subjecting your teeth to a multi-pronged abrasive assault. You can almost feel that persistent, low-level grittiness in your own mouth now, just imagining it. It's a sensation that would have been so familiar to an ancient Egyptian that they probably barely registered it consciously, much like we don't constantly think about the texture of our modern soft bread. But their teeth registered it every single day. This dietary reality is the crucial backdrop against which all their attempts at oral hygiene must be viewed. They weren't just fighting morning breath or the occasional piece of stuck food. They were battling the very nature of their staple sustenance. Any toothpaste, no matter how ingeniously concocted, was up against a formidable daily onslaught of dietary abrasives. It's no wonder, then, that their smiles, as revealed by their mummified remains, often told such a tale of wear and tear. The first light of dawn is now seeping through the narrow openings of your dwelling, painting stripes across the packed earth floor. You can hear the world outside stirring, the distant lowing of cattle, the chatter of your neighbors already up and about, perhaps the rhythmic thud of a pestle as someone prepares grain for the day. You sit up, the reed mat crinkling softly beneath you, and the first thing you become acutely aware of, even before the grit from last night's bread, is that familiar, stale taste in your mouth. It's the universal human experience of morning, breath, a phenomenon that even the sun-kissed inhabitants of ancient Egypt couldn't escape, though their version might have had a unique bouquet, shall we say. Imagine it, the accumulated residue of yesterday's meals, that gritty bread, the sweet dates, perhaps some dried fish or lentils, has been quietly fermenting in the warm, moist environment of your mouth all night. The bacteria have had a veritable feast. Mainstream historical fact, morning breath or halitosis is primarily caused by anaerobic bacteria breaking down proteins and food particles in the mouth, producing volatile sulfur compounds, the culprits behind the unpleasant odor. Science is modern, but the problem is ancient as mouths themselves. You yawn, a wide, jaw-stretching yawn, and the air you exhale isn't exactly redolent of lotus blossoms. It's thick, a bit sour, maybe even carrying a faint metallic tang if you've got a dental issue brewing, which, as we've established, is highly probable. You look around. If you're in a modest home, your family members are stirring too, sharing this intimate, if unglamorous, morning ritual. There's no quick dash to a private bathroom, no splashing of cool, clean water from a gleaming tap. Water itself is a precious commodity, carried from the Nile or a nearby canal, stored in clay jars. Some of it will be used for drinking, some for cooking, and a little, perhaps, for a quick splash on the face. But a luxurious, water-intensive oral rinsing session? Probably not on the daily agenda for most. Consider the environment. The air itself, while often dry, could also be thick with the smells of life. Cooking fires, animals, the river, perhaps even the less pleasant aromas of waste disposal, which, in densely populated areas, wasn't always as sophisticated as one might hope. Quirky tidbit. Some tomb paintings depict scenes of daily life that include individuals discreetly holding a lotus flower to their nose, possibly as a personal air freshener in crowded or less fragrant situations. It makes you wonder if the general olfactory background made one's own morning breath seem less noticeable, or perhaps just another scent in a rich tapestry of smells. Or maybe it made the desire for some kind of personal freshness even more acute. You might try a swish of water if there's some readily available, just to clear the worst of it. But without the cleansing agents and mechanical action of modern oral care, it's a temporary fix at best. The underlying causes, the food debris and the bacterial party, remain largely undisturbed. Historians still discuss the nuances of daily hygiene practices across different social classes, but it's safe to assume that the struggle for a pleasant morning mouth was a common one. What did the breath of the gods actually smell like? Probably not as divine as their statues looked, especially first thing after waking. Think of the social implications. You're about to interact with your family, your neighbors, perhaps your co-workers if you're heading out to the fields or a construction site. While they might be in the same boat, so to speak, there's still that innate human desire not to be overtly offensive. A shared experience doesn't necessarily make it a pleasant one. You might instinctively cover your mouth when you speak closely to someone, or turn your head slightly. These are small, almost unconscious gestures born from millennia of dealing with this very issue. The ancient Egyptians, as we know, placed a high value on appearance and presentation, particularly in more formal or religious contexts. Priests, for example, had to maintain a state of ritual purity, which included shaving their entire bodies and frequent washing. It's hard to imagine that their breath would be exempt from such scrutiny, at least in theory. Perhaps they had access to more potent breath fresheners than the average farmer. Or maybe their divine duties simply required them to stoically ignore the less than divine exhalations of their colleagues during early morning temple rituals. The very act of waking in this ancient context is a sensory experience far removed from our own. The feel of the cool morning air on your skin, the sounds of a world powered by human and animal muscle rather than machines, the textures of your simple bedding and clothing, and pervading it all, that subtle, or not so subtle, reminder from your own mouth that the night has passed and the bacteria have been busy. It's a humbling thought, really. For all their monumental achievements, their intricate belief systems, their sophisticated artistry, the ancient Egyptians were still grappling with the same fundamental biological realities that we do. Morning breath, the great equalizer even, in the land of the pharaohs. It probably fueled many a silent, desperate wish for something, anything, that could make that first greeting of the day a little less pungent. And it's this very human, very relatable predicament that sets the stage for their rather inventive and sometimes alarming attempts at creating what we might now call toothpaste. That lingering, less than fresh taste in your mouth, a souvenir from the night's bacterial revelries and the ever-present grit in your daily bread, serves as a persistent reminder of the need for intervention. And you, as an ancient Egyptian, are no stranger to the concept of cleanliness. In fact, your entire society, from the grandest temple rituals to the humblest daily ablutions, is steeped in a profound appreciation for purity. Mainstream historical fact. Cleanliness and purification were central to ancient Egyptian religious beliefs and practices, with priests needing to be ritually pure before performing ceremonies, and individuals often engaging in washing for both hygiene and spiritual well-being. This wasn't just about smelling nice, it was about being in a state of grace, fit to approach the gods, or even just to feel properly human. So this quest for cleanliness naturally extended to the body. You'd bathe when you could, perhaps in the somewhat murky but life-sustaining waters of the Nile or a canal, or using a basin of water in your home if you were a bit more well off. You'd use natron, that versatile, salty compound, to scrub your skin, feeling its slightly abrasive texture working to remove the grime of the day. You'd anoint your skin with oils, not just for fragrance, but also to protect it from the harsh, drying sun. Looking good, feeling clean. These were important. But the mouth, that gateway for speech, sustenance, and breath, presented a unique and rather stubborn challenge. The methods for achieving oral purity, as you're about to discover, were, well, let's just say they had their caveats, and might make you profoundly grateful for that tube of minty gel sitting in your 21st century bathroom. Imagine your daily routine. After dealing with the initial shock of your own morning breath, you might well feel a strong desire to do something about it. The Egyptian emphasis on ma'at, order, balance, truth, and justice, permeated their worldview, and a state of personal uncleanliness could be seen as a minor disruption to that. Cosmic harmony. It's a subject of ongoing scholarly discussion just how deeply these philosophical concepts trickled down into the everyday hygiene habits of the general populace. But the visual record in tombs, the preserved cosmetics, and the medical papyri all point to a society that cared about how it presented itself. So, what were your options? You couldn't just grab a toothbrush and paste. Instead, you'd be relying on ingenuity and the materials at hand. Perhaps you'd start with a vigorous rinse. Water, as we've said, was key. You might swish it around, trying to dislodge any loose particles. Some might have even used a natron solution as a rudimentary mouthwash, hoping its cleansing properties would extend to their gums and teeth. The taste would have been salty, perhaps a bit alkaline, and certainly not refreshing in the way we understand it. But if it made your mouth feel even slightly cleaner, it was worth it. The desire for a pleasant scent was also a driving factor. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Egyptians were master perfumers, creating complex fragrances from flowers, resins, and spices, not just for personal adornment, but also for religious ceremonies and even as air fresheners in tombs. It stands to reason that they would seek to apply this expertise to their breath. Chewing on aromatic herbs or spices was a likely practice. Think of fragrant leaves, seeds, or pieces of resin, perhaps a sprig of mint if it was cultivated nearby, or a small piece of frankincense or myrrh, those prized aromatic resins often associated with temple incense. You'd chew them slowly, hoping their fragrance would mask any underlying odors and leave a more pleasant scent on your breath. It's a bit like having a breath mint, but one you've plucked from a plant or a tree. However, masking an odor is one thing. Truly cleaning the teeth is another. The problem of that gritty bread, the sticky sugars, and the bacterial buildup required a more mechanical solution. This is where the caveats really come into play. While the Egyptians prized purity, their understanding of what actually caused dental decay or bad breath was, by modern standards, quite limited. They might attribute it to malevolent spirits, imbalances in the body's humours, or even divine displeasure. So, their solutions were often a blend of the practical, abrasives to scrub, and the magical, incantations or ingredients believed to have supernatural properties. You might feel a certain desperation. Your teeth ache, your gums are sore, and your breath, well, it's not winning you any friends among the sacred ibises. You want something that will scour away the grime, something that will make your mouth feel less like a forgotten corner of a granary and more like a part of a civilized human being. This deep-seated desire for oral cleanliness, set against a backdrop of limited scientific understanding, is what led to the development of their unique and often rather startling toothpaste recipes. They were trying their best with what they had to combat a universal problem. And as we delve deeper into those recipes, you'll see just how creative and perhaps how misguided, from our perspective, their efforts could be. It wasn't for lack of trying, but their methods, driven by an obsession with cleanliness yet hampered by the knowledge of their time, produced results that might make your teeth ache in sympathy. Right, so you're standing there, by the banks of the Nile, or perhaps in the somewhat dimmer interior of your mud brick home, the desire for a cleaner mouth a palpable sensation. You've acknowledged the gritty reality of your daily bread and the universal truth of morning breath. You understand that your society values cleanliness, almost to the point of obsession. But how, exactly, do you translate that desire into action when it comes to your teeth? The air is thick with the scent of river mud, baking bread, and perhaps a distant whiff of incense from a local shrine. But none of that is helping the state of your oral cavity. It's time to sift through the metaphorical dust of papyrus scrolls and the very real dust of archaeological digs to unpack what truly went into those ancient Egyptian dental concoctions, separating the minty myths from the often less palatable reality. You might have heard whispers, perhaps romanticized notions, of ancient Egyptians using exotic herbs and fragrant spices to keep their smiles dazzling. And yes, as we touched upon, aromatics certainly played a role, likely more for breath freshening than for deep cleaning. But the core of what we might tentatively call toothpaste was often far more utilitarian and considerably less poetic. Mainstream historical fact: recipes for tooth powders and cleaning agents have been found in ancient Egyptian medical papyri, such as the Ebers Papyrus, dating back to around 1550 BC, indicating a long history of attempts at oral hygiene. These weren't just casual home remedies. Some were recorded by scribes, suggesting a recognized, if rudimentary, form of dental care. Let's dispel one potential myth right away. You wouldn't be squeezing a vibrant gel-like substance from a tube. The concept of paste, as we know it, is a much later invention. What you'd more likely encounter are powders, or perhaps coarse mixtures that you might moisten slightly before use. Think less of a smooth, homogeneous blend, and more of a somewhat gritty assortment of ingredients, each chosen for a specific, if not always scientifically sound, purpose. The term toothpaste is a convenient modern label. Tooth powder, or dental abrasive, might be more accurate for many of these ancient formulations. So, what are we actually looking for in these ingredients? Primarily, an abrasive quality. Something to physically scrub away the food particles, the plaque, though they wouldn't have called it that, and perhaps even some of the surface stains. Remember that relentless grit from the bread? Well, the Egyptians seemed to believe that fighting fire with fire, or rather grit with grit, was the way to go. You're essentially looking for nature's tiny scrubbing brushes, things that could provide enough friction to feel like they were doing something. Then there's the desire for something that might neutralize odors or have some perceived medicinal property. This is where those aromatic resins like myrrh and frankincense come in, or perhaps crushed mint leaves or rock salt. Salt, with its cleansing and mildly antiseptic properties, was a common ingredient in many ancient remedies and would have been readily available. Imagine the sharp, slightly bitter taste of a salt-based powder in your mouth, a far cry from the sweet mint or cinnamon flavors we associate with modern toothpaste. It's a subject of ongoing research how effective these aromatic or medicinal components truly were beyond providing a temporary masking effect or a psychological sense of cleanliness. Archaeological finds also give us clues. Tiny cosmetic pots and spoons have been unearthed, some of which may have held these dental powders. Residue analysis, though challenging after millennia, can sometimes hint at the original contents. But often, our best source is those painstakingly transcribed papyri, where scribes recorded medical knowledge, including remedies for all sorts of ailments, dental woes among them. These texts are a window into their thinking, revealing a blend of empirical observation. This ingredient seems to scrub well, and magico-religious belief. This ingredient is favored by a particular god or has symbolic purity. One of the most famous, or perhaps infamous, depending on your sensibilities, recipes for an Egyptian tooth powder, found on a papyrus from the 4th century AD, but likely reflecting much older traditions, calls for a drachma of rock salt, 2 drachmas of mint, 1 drachma of dried iris flower, and 20 grains of pepper, all crushed together to form a fine powder. Quirky tidbit: the iris flower mentioned in some ancient recipes is believed to be orris root, the dried rhizome of certain iris species, which has a violet-like scent and was used in perfumery and ancient medicine, sometimes as an abrasive. That actually sounds not entirely terrible, does it? Salty, minty, peppery, with a floral note. Compared to some of other ingredients we're about to explore, this one is practically gourmet, but this is just one example, and perhaps a later, more refined one. As we delve deeper into the common components, you'll find that the pursuit of a clean tooth in ancient Egypt could involve some truly surprising and frankly rather unappetizing materials. The minty myths often focus on the more pleasant-sounding herbs, but the reality of many ancient Egyptian toothpaste ingredients was far more grounded in the gritty, the ashy, and the downright bizarre. They were working with what the natural world provided, and their interpretation of effective didn't always align with what we'd consider palatable or even particularly sensible today. The sifting continues as we prepare to look at the less fragrant, more robust elements of their dental arsenal. Alright, so you've mentally prepared yourself. You understand that the ancient Egyptian quest for clean teeth wasn't always a fragrant journey through fields of mint and iris. We've acknowledged that abrasiveness was key, a sort of fight grit with grit philosophy. Now, let's take a closer, perhaps slightly queasy, look at some of the core components that frequently appeared in these ancient dental powders, ingredients that truly highlight the, shall we say, robust nature of their oral hygiene. If the previous recipe with rock salt and mint sounded almost palatable, brace yourself. We're now venturing into territory that might make you clutch your modern toothbrush like a precious talisman. We're talking about things like ox hooves, ash, and eggshells, a veritable recipe for, if not disaster, then at least a very peculiar morning ritual. Imagine, if you will, the process of sourcing these ingredients. You're not popping down to the local ancient Egyptian equivalent of a pharmacy. For some of these, you're looking at byproducts of daily life, things that might otherwise be discarded, now repurposed in the relentless pursuit of a less offensive mouth. Let's start with the ox hooves. Yes, you heard that correctly. Mainstream, historical fact. Burnt or powdered ox hooves are mentioned in some ancient texts as an ingredient in tooth cleaning preparations, valued for their abrasive qualities when reduced to a powder. The idea was that the keratin and other hard materials in the hoof, once properly processed, likely by burning them until they were brittle and then pulverizing them, would create a coarse powder. You can almost picture the scene, the acrid smell of burning hoof lingering in the air. Then, the laborious task of pounding and grinding the charred remains into something fine enough, or perhaps not so fine, to be rubbed on your teeth. The texture would be gritty, undeniably. The taste? One can only imagine it would be earthy, smoky, definitely not minty fresh. You'd be taking this dark, slightly ominous powder, perhaps mixing it with a little water or honey to form a rudimentary paste, and then applying it. The sheer determination is admirable, isn't it? To look at a burnt ox hoof and think, yes, this is what my teeth need. It speaks volumes about how desperate people were for any kind of solution. Then there's ash, wood ash, to be specific. After the cooking fires have died down, or perhaps from a potter's kiln, you'd collect the fine grey powder. Ash, particularly. From hardwoods, contains alkaline salts like potassium carbonate and potassium hydroxide, which can have some cleansing and even mildly bleaching properties. Quirky tidbit: ash was a common all-purpose cleaning agent in many ancient cultures, used for everything from scrubbing pots to laundering clothes, so its inclusion in a tooth powder isn't entirely surprising from that perspective. It's abrasive. Certainly, you'd feel that fine grit working against your enamel. The taste would be bitter, alkaline, perhaps a bit like licking a very clean fireplace. Again, the focus is on scouring power, the ability to physically remove buildup. You might emerge from this experience with a mouth that feels stripped, if not exactly soothed. And what about eggshells, another common household item, another source of abrasive material? Crushed eggshells, when ground finely, create a powder rich in calcium carbonate, a compound still used in some modern toothpastes as a mild abrasive. So, in this instance, the ancient Egyptians were onto something that has stood the test of time, at least in principle. You'd carefully collect the shells after a meal, dry them, and then painstakingly grind them between two stones, much like grinding grain, until you had a fine, whitish powder. This might have been one of the more palatable options, texturally speaking, perhaps less harsh than the burnt ox hoof. The effectiveness of these home-ground powders would vary greatly depending on the fineness of the grind. Too coarse, and you're just scratching your enamel unnecessarily. It's a subject of ongoing speculation among dental historians how well they managed to control this crucial aspect. Think about the combination of these ingredients. Some recipes might have called for a blend, a bit of burnt ox hoof for heavy-duty scrubbing, some wood ash for its alkaline properties, and perhaps crushed eggshell for a calcium boost and finer polish. Maybe a pinch of rock salt for good measure. It's a veritable cocktail of the ancient world's cleaning cupboard, all aimed at your long-suffering teeth. You'd be there, diligently rubbing this concoction onto your gums and teeth, feeling the varied textures, tasting the strange, earthy and saline flavors, all in the hope that it would leave your mouth feeling better, or at least different. The dedication is almost touching, in a slightly horrifying way. These weren't lazy attempts. Sourcing, preparing, and applying these ingredients took time and effort. It shows a genuine commitment to an ideal of oral cleanliness, even if their methods make us shudder a little. They were using the materials available in their environment, applying the logic of their time. If it scrubs a pot clean, surely it can scrub a tooth clean? It's a reminder that effective is a relative term, and what seemed like a perfectly reasonable solution in 1500 BC might look like a recipe for dental disaster from our vantage point. But for you, standing there in ancient Egypt, this gritty, ashy, hoofy mixture is your best bet. So, you take a deep breath, best not to inhale the powder, and get to work. After contemplating the rather robust, shall we say, earthy end of the ancient Egyptian toothpaste spectrum, the ox hooves and ashes, you might be yearning for something, anything, a little more refined, a little less challenging to the senses. And thankfully, it wasn't all grit and grime. Alongside those heavy-duty abrasives, the ancient Egyptians, with their renowned love for pleasant aromas and beautiful things, also incorporated ingredients aimed at a more fragrant, if not always entirely effective, oral experience. We're now moving into the realm of myrrh, frankincense, and floral fantasies, where the goal was perhaps less about scouring and more about soothing, perfuming, and maybe even imbuing the mouth with a touch of the sacred. Imagine the contrast. One moment you're pondering the practicality of powdered hoof, and the next, your attention shifts to a small, precious lump of resin, exuding a rich, warm, balsamic fragrance. This is myrrh, or perhaps its equally esteemed cousin, frankincense. Mainstream historical fact: frankincense and myrrh were highly prized aromatic resins in the ancient world, imported into Egypt from regions like Punt or Arabia, and used extensively in incense, perfumes, cosmetics, and religious rituals. These weren't just pleasant smells, they were imbued with cultural and spiritual significance. Their inclusion in a dental preparation would have elevated it from a mere cleaning agent to something almost luxurious, something touched by the divine. You'd take a small piece of this resin, perhaps already powdered, or you might gently warm it to make it more pliable. The scent alone would be a welcome change from the acrid notes of burnt offerings or the dusty smell of ground stone. Myrrh, known for its slightly bitter, warm and earthy aroma, was also believed to have antiseptic and anti-inflammatory properties. Ancient physicians used it for wound healing and embalming, so its presence in a tooth powder might have been intended not just to freshen breath, but also to soothe sore gums or combat infection. You can almost feel the subtle tingle, the way the resinous compounds might interact with the soft tissues of your mouth, a world away from the harsh scraping of coarser abrasives. Frankincense, with its brighter, more citrusy and pine-like notes, was equally valued. Its smoke was thought to carry prayers to the gods, to purify spaces, and to create an atmosphere of sanctity. Rubbing a powder containing frankincense onto your teeth might have felt like a small act of personal devotion, a way of making your mouth worthy of uttering sacred words, or simply enjoying the day with a cleaner conscience and, hopefully, sweeter breath. The precise efficacy of these resins in terms of dental health is still debated by modern science, but their psychological impact, the feeling of using something precious and fragrant, would have been undeniable. Beyond the famous resins, there were flowers and herbs. Remember that recipe mentioning dried iris flower, likely orris root? Its delicate, violet-like fragrance would have been a sophisticated addition. Mint, of course, is a classic. Crushed mint leaves, releasing their cool, sharp aroma, would provide an immediate, if temporary, sensation of freshness. You might find evidence of other local aromatic plants being used, perhaps chamomile for its soothing properties, or even crushed cinnamon bark or cardamom if trade routes permitted, though these would have been even more luxurious. Quirky tidbit: some tomb paintings and reliefs depict individuals offering or receiving flowers, and floral garlands were common, suggesting a deep appreciation for floral scents that likely extended to personal care. Imagine creating a blend, a base of a mild abrasive like finely ground salt, or very, very fine, one hopes, sand, to which you add powdered myrrh for its purported healing properties, a touch of frankincense for its uplifting scent, and a generous pinch of dried mint for that burst of freshness. This is starting to sound less like a chore and more like a rather pleasant, almost spa-like ritual for your mouth. You'd carefully mix these ingredients in a small stone bowl, the different colors and textures combining: the pale salt, the reddish-brown myrrh, the creamy frankincense, the green flecks of mint. The aroma alone would be an improvement. The application might still involve your finger or a frayed twig, but the experience would be transformed. Instead of just enduring a gritty scrub, you're now engaging with pleasant fragrances, with substances that feel special. It's a reminder that ancient Egyptian hygiene wasn't solely about stark functionality. Aesthetics and sensory pleasure played a significant role, especially for those who could afford such refinements. Whether these aromatic additions did much to combat the underlying dental issues caused by that sandy bread is, of course, a key question. They might have masked odors effectively for a short while, and perhaps some, like myrrh, offered mild, antiseptic benefits. But their primary contribution was likely to the experience of oral care, making it a more palatable, even enjoyable, part of the daily routine. It's a testament to the human desire not just to be clean, but to feel good, to smell good, and to surround oneself with beauty, even in the most mundane of tasks like brushing your teeth, or the ancient Egyptian equivalent thereof. Section 8. So, you've concocted your ancient Egyptian tooth powder. Perhaps it's the robust, no-nonsense blend of burnt ox hoof and ash, or maybe you've indulged in a more fragrant mix of myrrh, mint, and finely ground salt. You've got your little pile of gritty, scented dust in a small pottery dish, or cupped in your palm. Now comes the practical part. How do you actually get this stuff onto your teeth and gums effectively? You can't just magically wish it into place. Forget your modern, ergonomically designed toothbrush with its scientifically angled bristles and soft grip handle. The application of these ancient pastes was a far more rudimentary, hands-on affair, primarily involving frayed twigs and, quite simply, your own fingers. Let's start with the most basic tool, one that's been used for dental hygiene across cultures for millennia, the chew stick, or miswak, mainstream historical fact. Chew sticks, often made from twigs of specific plants with antiseptic or aromatic properties, have been used for oral cleaning since antiquity and are still used in some parts of the world today. You'd select a suitable twig, perhaps from a tree like the Salvadora persica, the arak tree, though its prevalence in ancient Egypt specifically is a subject of some discussion, or another local plant known for its fibrous texture or beneficial properties. The key was to find a twig that wasn't too hard, nor too soft. You'd then prepare your toothbrush. One end of the twig would be chewed or frayed, perhaps by gnawing on it or by pounding it gently with a stone, until the fibers separated to form a sort of brush-like tip. It wouldn't be as neat or uniform as modern bristles, more like a splayed, slightly stiff brush. You now have your implement. You might dip this frayed end into your tooth powder, picking up a small amount of the abrasive mixture. Then, you'd begin to rub it carefully over the surfaces of your teeth and along your gum line. The motion would be a scrubbing or brushing one, much like we do today, but the tool itself would feel very different in your hand and in your mouth. Imagine the sensation: the slightly rough, woody fibers against your enamel, the gritty powder being worked into the crevices. It would require a certain amount of dexterity to reach all the surfaces, especially the back molars. You'd probably spend a good few minutes diligently scrubbing, spitting out the excess powder and saliva as you go. It's a very direct, very tactile experience. You can feel the abrasives at work, and you'd be hoping that this mechanical action is dislodging those stubborn food particles and that gritty film from your morning bread. If a suitable twig wasn't available, or perhaps if you preferred an even more direct approach, your own finger would be the next best thing. Quirky tidbit: in many cultures throughout history, before the widespread availability of toothbrushes, using a finger, sometimes wrapped in a piece of cloth, to rub cleaning powders onto the teeth was a common practice. You dip your index finger into the tooth powder, ensuring a good coating, and then use it to massage your teeth and gums. This method would give you a great deal of control, allowing you to apply pressure where you felt it was needed most. You could really get into the contours of your teeth, feeling for any rough spots or areas that needed extra attention. Of course, using your finger means you're also tasting the tooth powder quite directly. That earthy ox hoof or the salty, peppery blend would be very present on your palate. You'd likely rinse your mouth frequently during this process, trying to get rid of the dislodged debris and the taste of the cleaning agent itself. It's a messy business, no doubt. There'd be no neat foaming action like with modern toothpaste, just a gritty slurry that you're manually working around your mouth. Historians continue to piece together the specifics of these daily practices, from artistic depictions, archaeological finds of potential chew sticks, though these are rare and hard to definitively identify, and the nature of the tooth powders themselves. It's generally agreed that some form of mechanical cleaning was attempted, but the sophistication and regularity would have varied enormously. For the wealthy, perhaps a slave would assist, or they might have access to finer quality powders and more carefully prepared chew sticks. For the average farmer, it might be a quick scrub with a finger and whatever ash was left over from the morning fire. The effectiveness of these ancient toothbrushes is also worth considering. A frayed twig could certainly provide some abrasive action, but it wouldn't be as efficient or as gentle as modern bristles. It would be easy to miss spots or to scrub too hard and irritate the gums, especially with some of the coarser powders. Using a finger might be gentler on the gums, but perhaps less effective at removing plaque from between the teeth. It's a world of trade-offs, a constant balancing act between the desire for cleanliness and the limitations of the tools at hand. But the intent is clear, a determined effort to use what was available, be it a simple twig or their own digit. To apply these ancient concoctions and hopefully achieve a mouth that felt, if not perfectly polished, then at least a little less like a sandy archaeological site. Section 9, you've now got your chosen tooth powder. perhaps the robust, no-nonsense blend, or the more fragrant, resin-infused variety, and you've selected your cleaning implement, be it a carefully frayed twig or your own trusty index finger. As you stand there, diligently scrubbing, a question might drift into your mind, as gentle and persistent as the Nile's current. Did the rich and powerful, the pharaohs in their gilded palaces, the high priests in their sacred temple precincts, have access to a superior form of dental care? Did wealth and status in ancient Egypt buy you a better smile? Or was everyone, from the peasant to the potentate, suffering the same gritty fate when it came to their teeth? It's a fascinating question, and the answer, like many things in history, is nuanced. On one hand, the fundamental problem, that sandy, abrasive bread, was a great equalizer. Mainstream historical fact. Studies of royal mummies, including famous pharaohs like Ramesses II and Amenhotep III, reveal significant dental problems, including severe attrition, abscesses, and periodontal disease, indicating that even the highest echelons of society were not immune to these issues. So, no matter how luxurious your palace or how fine your linen, you were still consuming grain that had been ground with stone, and your teeth were paying the price. The image of a mighty pharaoh, ruler of two lands, wincing from a toothache is a rather humanizing one, isn't it? However, wealth and status undoubtedly brought certain advantages. While they couldn't entirely escape the grit, the elite likely had access to more finely sifted flour. Their bread might have been less abrasive, though probably not entirely, free of stone particles. They also had a more varied diet, potentially with more access to softer foods, fruits and meats, which might have slightly mitigated the relentless wear from bread alone. But this is speculative, and the mummified evidence suggests that even a more varied diet couldn't fully counteract the damage. Where wealth likely made a more significant difference was in the quality and variety of the toothpastes and cleaning agents available, and perhaps in the very act of cleaning. Imagine a high-ranking noble. They wouldn't be personally collecting wood ash or painstakingly grinding eggshells. They would have servants to prepare these things. Their tooth powders might include more expensive imported ingredients, purer forms of myrrh and frankincense, perhaps rarer aromatic herbs, or even powdered minerals believed to have special cleansing or protective properties. Quirky tidbit. Some interpretations of ancient texts suggest that certain precious stones or minerals, like powdered lapis lazuli or malachite, were occasionally incorporated into cosmetics and medicinal preparations, though their use in dental powders specifically is less clear and highly speculative. It points to the kind of exotic ingredients the wealthy might access. Furthermore, the act of cleaning itself might have been more thorough, or even performed by a servant. A dedicated attendant could potentially do a more meticulous job of applying the powders and ensuring all accessible tooth surfaces were scrubbed. They might also have access to more carefully selected and prepared chew sticks. It's also possible that the elite had more leisure time to devote to personal grooming, including oral hygiene, compared to a farmer whose days were consumed by hard labor. Yet, despite these potential advantages, the mummies tell a clear story. Severe dental problems were rife across the social spectrum. This suggests that the premium dental care of the ancient Egyptian elite was still largely ineffective against the primary causes of their woes. Their tooth powders might have smelled better, tasted less offensive, or been applied with more ceremony, but they probably weren't significantly better at preventing attrition, decay, or gum disease. The underlying science of what caused these problems and how to effectively combat them was simply not understood. It's a subject of ongoing debate among Egyptologists and dental anthropologists just how much of a practical difference versus a psychological or status-driven one these elite dental practices made. Consider the psychological aspect. Using a tooth powder laced with expensive imported resins, applied by a servant in an ornate cosmetic vessel, would certainly feel more luxurious and affirm one's status. It might provide a greater sense of well-being and cleanliness, even if the actual dental benefits were minimal. In a society so attuned to symbolism and ritual, the act itself, performed with high-quality ingredients, could have been as important, as the measurable outcome. So, while the pharaoh might not have been spared the agony of a throbbing abscess, their experience of trying to prevent it, or at least freshen their breath, was likely more refined. They weren't hunched over a smoky fire hoping the burnt ox hoof powder would do the trick. They were reclining, perhaps, while an attendant gently applied a fragrant, specially prepared concoction. The end result, a mouth still prone to serious dental issues, might have been similar, but the journey, the daily ritual of oral care, would have been vastly different. It's a subtle distinction, but one that highlights the pervasive influence of social hierarchy, even in something as personal as trying to keep your teeth clean in a world before modern dentistry. You've diligently scrubbed with your twig or finger, using the best tooth powder your status and resources can afford. You've rinsed with Nile water, perhaps chewed on a fragrant leaf. But despite all these efforts, a dull ache might still throb in your jaw, or a tooth might feel uncomfortably loose. The true story of ancient Egyptian dental health, the unvarnished reality behind all those powders and potions, isn't found in the recipes alone. For that, we must turn to the silent witnesses, the remarkably preserved bodies of the ancient Egyptians themselves, their mummies. The evidence from beyond the grave offers a stark, often painful testament to the state of their teeth, revealing far more than any papyrus scroll ever could. Imagine yourself as an archaeologist, or perhaps a paleopathologist, carefully examining the jaws and teeth of a mummy unwrapped after millennia in a dry, dark tomb. The arid climate of Egypt, combined with their sophisticated mummification practices, has preserved not just bones, but sometimes even soft tissues and teeth in astonishing detail. Mainstream historical fact: the study of ancient Egyptian mummies has provided invaluable insights into the health, diet, diseases, and lifestyles of this ancient population, with dental pathology being a particularly well-documented area. As you peer into that ancient mouth, the story unfolds. The first thing you'd likely notice is the extreme wear, the dental attrition we've spoken of. Teeth, especially the molars used for grinding, are often worn flat, sometimes right down to the gum line. You can see the different layers of the tooth exposed, the outer enamel, the softer dentin beneath, and in severe cases, even the pulp cavity. Remember that gritty bread. This is its handiwork, etched into the very structure of their being. You can almost feel the phantom sensation of that constant grinding, the slow erosion that occurred with every meal, day after day, year after year. Then there are the telltale signs of dental caries, or cavities. While the abrasive diet might have scrubbed some surfaces clean, the sugary elements from dates, figs, and honey, combined with the cracks and fissures created by attrition, provided ample opportunity for decay-causing bacteria to take hold. You might see dark spots, actual holes in the enamel, evidence of the same kind of tooth decay that plagues us today, only without the option of a quick filling. Quirky tidbit: some mummies show evidence of interproximal caries, cavities forming between the teeth, suggesting that while their diet was abrasive, food could still get trapped in those hard-to-reach areas, leading to decay, much like an unflossed modern mouth. But it often gets worse. As decay progressed, or as teeth wore down to expose the sensitive pulp, infections would inevitably set in. You might observe dental abscesses, pockets of pus at the root of a tooth or in the surrounding jawbone. These would have been incredibly painful, causing swelling, fever, and a constant throbbing ache. You can see the evidence in the bone itself. Small holes or areas of erosion where the infection has eaten away at the jaw. Imagine living with that kind of chronic pain, with no antibiotics, no effective painkillers beyond perhaps opium in some limited cases, and certainly no root canals. It's a sobering thought. Periodontal disease, or gum disease, was also rampant. The constant irritation from the abrasive diet, plaque buildup, and perhaps the harshness of some of their cleaning methods would lead to inflammation of the gums, gingivitis. Over time, this could progress to periodontitis, where the infection spreads to the ligaments and bone that support the teeth, causing them to become loose and eventually fall out. Many Egyptian mummies are missing numerous teeth, not just due to post-mortem loss, but because they were lost during life due to severe gum disease. The remaining teeth might be encrusted with calculus or tartar, hardened plaque, further testament to the challenges they faced in keeping their mouths truly clean. It's a subject of considerable research to determine if there were noticeable differences in dental health between, say, the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom, or between different geographical regions. Did changes in diet or food preparation techniques over the centuries have an impact? The mummies provide the raw data for these ongoing investigations. For instance, some studies suggest that dental health may have actually worsened in later periods, possibly due to changes in diet or an increase in the consumption of refined sugars when they became more available through trade. The teeth of these ancient individuals are like a personal diary, recording their diet, their habits, and their suffering. You can see evidence of teeth that were misaligned, impacted wisdom teeth causing problems, and even, in rare cases, rudimentary attempts at dental intervention, which we'll explore later. Each jaw tells a story of resilience in the face of chronic discomfort. It's a stark reminder that beneath the golden masks and serene statues were real people, experiencing very real and often very painful dental afflictions. Their elaborate efforts with tooth powders and chew sticks were a brave, if ultimately insufficient, defense against an onslaught of dietary and environmental factors that made good oral health an almost unattainable ideal. The silent testimony of the mummies speaks volumes, echoing across the millennia. Life in ancient Egypt, for all its wonders, could be a real pain in the mouth. We've spent a good while now peering into the ancient Egyptian mouth, contemplating their gritty bread, their often alarming toothpaste ingredients, and the rather grim evidence preserved in the teeth of mummies. But the Egyptian preoccupation with personal presentation and aroma didn't stop at the lips. Since we're already immersed in the world of their somewhat peculiar personal care routines, let's briefly widen our gaze and explore some of the other curious concoctions and fragrant fancies they slathered, dabbed, and sprinkled upon their bodies in the name of cleanliness, allure, or even divine favor. If you thought powdered ox hoof for your teeth was inventive, wait until you hear about some of their other beauty secrets. You're already aware of their love for perfumes and scented oils. These weren't just for special occasions, they were an integral part of daily life for those who could afford them. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptians were renowned for their sophisticated perfume making, using a process called enfleurage to extract scents from flowers like lilies, lotus, and jasmine, often infused into animal fats or vegetable oils like moringa or castor oil. Imagine the perfumed air in the homes of the wealthy, or the subtle scent of myrrh or cinnamon clinging to their clothing and hair. These oils not only made them smell divine, but also helped to moisturize and protect their skin from the dry desert climate. You might see depictions of party guests with cones of scented fat on their heads, which would slowly melt during the festivities, releasing their fragrance and conditioning the hair, a sort of ancient, slow-release deodorant and hair pomade, all in one. But it wasn't just about smelling good, it was also about looking good, according to their particular aesthetic standards. Kohl eyeliner is perhaps the most iconic ancient Egyptian cosmetic. Both men and women, from all social classes, would apply thick black or dark grey kohl around their eyes. This wasn't just for dramatic effect, though it certainly enhanced their gaze. Quirky tidbit. The lead-based minerals in kohl, like galena, were once thought by some researchers to have had some antibacterial properties and might have helped protect against eye infections common in the dusty, fly-ridden environment, and also to reduce sun glare, a sort of ancient sunglass effect. So, your kohl-rimmed eyes, peering out from beneath a neatly styled wig, were both fashionable and perhaps functional. The preparation of kohl was an art in itself, grinding the minerals into a fine powder and mixing them with a little oil or fat to create a paste, then applying it with a slender stick of wood, ivory, or bronze. Skincare was also a priority. They used various oils and creams to keep their skin soft and supple. Honey, with its moisturizing and antibacterial properties, was a prized ingredient in some skin preparations. Natron, that versatile salt, could be used as an exfoliant, mixed with oil or water to create a scrub. They were also concerned about wrinkles and blemishes, and medical papyri contain recipes for creams and poultices designed to smooth the skin and maintain a youthful appearance. Whether these concoctions of crocodile dung mixed with other, less alarming ingredients actually worked is, of course, highly debatable, but it shows their dedication to the cause. The precise ingredients and their efficacy are often a subject of scholarly interpretation, but the intent to beautify and preserve is clear. Hair care was another area of focus. While many Egyptians, especially priests and those concerned with ritual purity, shaved their heads, wigs were extremely popular for both men and women. These wigs, made from human hair or plant fibers, were often elaborate and intricately styled, sometimes dyed and scented. To keep their own hair, if they had it, or their wigs looking their best, they used various oils and fats as conditioners and styling aids. Beeswax might have been used to help hold curls or intricate plaits in place. There's even evidence of attempts to combat baldness and grey hair, with recipes involving ingredients like boiled porcupine quills or the fat of various animals, applied with a healthy dose of hope, no doubt. And let's not forget body odour. In a hot climate, before the advent of modern antiperspirants, this would have been a constant concern. Aside from regular bathing and the use of scented oils, they may have used alum, a mineral salt known for its astringent properties, as a rudimentary deodorant. Aromatic herbs and resins could also be tucked into clothing or worn in small pouches to release a pleasant fragrance throughout the day. It's clear that the ancient Egyptians invested considerable time, effort, and resources into their personal appearance and hygiene. From their elaborate eye makeup to their perfumed oils and experimental skin creams, they were pioneers in the art of cosmetics and bodily care. While some of their practices might seem strange or even unsanitary to us, crocodile dung face mask, anyone, they reflect a deep-seated human desire to look, feel, and smell good, and to present the best possible version of oneself to the world and to the gods. It's a fascinating extension of the same impulse that drove them to scrub their teeth with powdered hooves. A relentless, if sometimes misguided, pursuit of purity and perfection. So, you've diligently applied your ox hoof powder, chewed, on your miswak stick, and perhaps even dabbed a bit of kohl around your eyes for that authentic Egyptian flair. But what happens when all these preventative measures fail? What if, despite your best efforts, that dull ache in your jaw blossoms into an agonizing, relentless throb? What if a tooth cracks, or an abscess swells your cheek to the size of a ripe fig? When the pastes and powders proved insufficient, what? Were the ancient Egyptian equivalents of a trip to the dentist, or at least a desperate plea for relief through magical mutterings? The options, you'll find, were somewhat limited and often blurred the lines between practical intervention, herbal remedies, and outright magic. True dentistry, as we understand it, with precise tools, anesthesia, and sterile procedures, was a long way off. However, the ancient Egyptians weren't entirely without recourse when faced with severe dental distress. Mainstream historical fact: the Edwin Smith Papyrus, a medical text dating to around 1600 BC, describes various surgical procedures and treatments for wounds and fractures, including some related to the jaw, indicating a degree of practical medical knowledge. While specific dental surgery as a distinct field is not clearly defined, physicians, known as SWNW, Sunu, and other healers, would have certainly encountered and attempted to treat dental ailments. If you were suffering from a severe toothache, your first port of call might be a local healer or priest who specialized in such afflictions. Their approach would likely be multifaceted. They might examine your mouth, perhaps prodding gently with a finger or a smooth stick, trying to identify the source of the pain. Then, a poultice might be prescribed. Remember those ingredients we discussed for tooth powders? Some of them, particularly those with perceived medicinal properties like myrrh or honey, might be mixed with other herbs known for their soothing or anti-inflammatory effects, or at least believed to have them, and applied directly to the sore, tooth or gum. You might be instructed to pack this mixture around the tooth and leave it there, hoping it would draw out the evil or reduce the swelling. Beyond topical applications, there were magical incantations. Quirky tidbit. Many ancient Egyptian medical treatments, even for seemingly physical ailments, incorporated magical spells and rituals, as illness was often believed to have a supernatural component, such as the influence of a malevolent deity or a restless spirit. So, as the healer applied the poultice, they might also chant specific words, invoke certain gods associated with healing, like Sekhmet, the fierce lioness goddess who could both bring and cure disease, or Isis, the great magician, or even perform symbolic actions designed to banish the cause of the pain. You, as the sufferer, would likely participate, perhaps repeating certain phrases or holding a specific amulet. The psychological comfort of these rituals, the feeling that something powerful was being done, should not be underestimated, even if the direct medical benefit was questionable. The line between medicine and magic was often very blurry indeed, and it's a subject of continuous academic discussion how practitioners and patients themselves perceived this blend. What about actual extraction? If a tooth was very loose and clearly the source of intractable pain, pulling it might have been considered. However, without proper tools for gripping and extracting teeth cleanly, and certainly without anesthesia, this would have been an incredibly traumatic and dangerous procedure. The risk of fracturing the jaw, causing massive infection, or leaving behind broken roots was immense. Evidence for routine tooth extraction in ancient Egypt is surprisingly scarce in the skeletal record, suggesting it wasn't a common practice, perhaps reserved only for the most desperate of cases, or performed in a way that left little clear osteological trace. Some mummies show teeth that were clearly lost during life, but whether this was due to deliberate extraction or simply advanced periodontal disease causing them to fall out naturally is often hard to determine. There are a few rare and debated examples of what might be considered rudimentary dental prosthetics or attempts to stabilize loose teeth. For instance, a couple of specimens show teeth bound together with gold wire. Was this done during life to support a wobbly tooth, or was it a post-mortem cosmetic procedure to ensure the deceased looked their best for the afterlife? The consensus often leans towards the latter, but it does hint at an awareness of dental structure and perhaps some experimental attempts at intervention. If the pain was unbearable, opium, derived from the poppy plant, was known in the ancient Near East and Egypt and may have been used as a powerful painkiller in some instances, though its availability and specific application for dental pain are not extensively documented. More commonly, you might be given concoctions of various herbs believed to have analgesic properties, or instructed to rinse your mouth with specific infusions. The efficacy of these would have varied wildly. Ultimately, for many ancient Egyptians suffering from severe dental problems, the options were limited to enduring the pain, hoping a herbal poultice or a magical spell would work, or waiting for the offending tooth to eventually fall out on its own. It's a stark contrast to our modern world of specialized dental care. Their attempts to alleviate suffering were born of ingenuity and a deep-seated desire to heal, but they were constrained by the medical understanding of their era. So, if your ox hoof toothpaste failed you, you were largely reliant on a combination of hope, herbs, and incantations to see you through the agony. You're lying there, a poultice of questionable herbs packed against your throbbing gum, the faint scent of myrrh perhaps mingling with the less pleasant aroma of impending dental doom. The healer has muttered their incantations, the words designed to banish the malevolent spirit currently tap dancing on your exposed nerve. In these moments of suffering, when practical remedies seem to fall short, where else does the ancient Egyptian mind turn? To the gods, of course. In a world where the divine was woven into the very fabric of existence, it's only natural to wonder, were there specific deities of health and hygiene you could petition for a toothache-free existence, or perhaps a divinely fresh breath to impress your local priest? Who were the gods of gums and grime? While there wasn't one single, universally acclaimed god of toothpaste, or patron saint of flossing in the sprawling Egyptian pantheon, several deities had domains that touched upon health, healing, and purity, making them likely candidates for a desperate prayer when your jaw was on fire. Mainstream historical fact, Sekhmet, the lioness-headed goddess, was a powerful and often feared deity associated with both plague and pestilence, as well as healing and protection. Appeasing her was crucial for averting disaster and restoring health. If you were suffering from a particularly nasty infection or unbearable pain, you might well direct your pleas, and perhaps a hefty offering, towards Sekhmet, hoping to soothe her wrath and invoke her healing aspect. You'd be wise to approach her with a good deal of respect, given her fiery temperament. Then there's Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, magic, and knowledge. As the divine scribe and a master of sacred texts, Thoth was often associated with medical knowledge and the formulation of remedies. Many medical papyri containing recipes and incantations were considered to be under his patronage. So, if a healer was mixing a special concoction for your dental woes, they might be mentally or verbally invoking Thoth to guide their hand and ensure the efficacy of the ingredients. You, as the patient, might also whisper a prayer to Thoth, asking for wisdom to be bestowed upon your healer, or for the magic inherent in the prescribed words to take effect. Isis, the great mother goddess, known for her immense magical powers, and her role as a protector and healer, was another key figure. Quirky tidbit. Isis was famed for her ability to heal her son Horus after he was stung by a scorpion, and her magical prowess extended to curing various ailments. Her compassionate nature made her a popular deity to appeal to in times of distress. If you were in pain, especially if you were a woman or child, seeking the solace and healing touch of Isis would be a natural recourse. Her temples often became centers of healing, where the sick would come seeking cures through dreams, rituals, and the intercession of her priests. You might offer her a simple prayer, or perhaps a small votive offering representing the afflicted body part, maybe a tiny clay tooth. If such things existed, though clear archaeological evidence for specific dental votives is sparse, the exact nature of such personal devotional practices is still an area ripe for scholarly exploration. Bes, the dwarf god, a rather comical and grotesque figure with a lion's mane and a feathered headdress, might seem an unlikely candidate. However, Bes was a popular household protector, particularly associated with childbirth, fertility, and averting evil. He was seen as a guardian against malevolent spirits and a bringer of joy and good luck. While not specifically a god of dental health, you might invoke Bes to ward off the evil spirits believed to be causing your toothache, or to bring a bit of cheerful relief from your suffering. His amulets were common, worn for general protection and well-being. And what about general purity and cleanliness, so vital to the Egyptian worldview? While no single god explicitly oversaw hygiene in the modern sense, the concept of wabet, meaning purity or cleanliness, was a divine attribute. Deities associated with water, like Hapi, the god of the Nile inundation, could be seen as contributing to cleanliness by providing the means for washing. Priests and priestesses dedicated to various gods had to maintain strict ritual purity, which included frequent washing and shaving, so the gods they served implicitly valued this state. It's important to remember that ancient Egyptian religion was complex and fluid. People might appeal to their local town god, their personal household deities, or any god whose attributes seemed relevant to their particular predicament. If your tooth was aching because you suspected you'd offended a specific deity, your prayers and offerings would be directed towards appeasing them. The relationship was often transactional, an offering in exchange for divine favor or relief. So, as you lie there, hoping for relief, your mind might wander through this divine landscape. Would a prayer to Sekhmet quell the fiery infection? Could Thoth's wisdom guide the remedy? Would Isis's compassionate magic soothe the pain? Or perhaps a cheerful appeal to Bes might simply lighten your spirits enough to endure? There wasn't a divine hotline for dental emergencies, but the gods were always listening, always present, their influence felt in every aspect of life, right down to the throbbing of an infected molar. And in a world without modern dentistry, that divine connection, that hope for supernatural intervention, was a powerful and often essential coping mechanism. We've journeyed through the gritty reality of ancient Egyptian bread, peered into their rather alarming toothpaste recipes, felt the phantom scrape of a frayed twig against enamel, and even whispered a prayer to Sekhmet for dental salvation. Now, after all this exploration, after considering the ox hooves, the myrrh, the incantations, and the silent testimony of the mummies, it's time for a calm, perhaps slightly sarcastic, assessment. We must ask the crucial question: did any of this actually work? Did these elaborate efforts, born from a desire for cleanliness and relief from pain, make any real discernible difference to their oral hygiene and dental health? Let's be brutally honest. From our lofty 21st century perspective, armed with the knowledge of microbiology, fluoride, and precision dental tools, mostly no, not in the way we understand working today. Mainstream historical fact: despite their various attempts at oral hygiene, the prevalence of severe dental attrition, caries, abscesses, and periodontal disease in ancient Egyptian remains indicates that their methods were largely ineffective in preventing these common and often debilitating conditions. The mummies, as we've seen, are quite vocal on this point, their silent jaws screaming a tale of woe. Consider the primary culprit, that abrasive, sand-filled bread. No amount of powdered oxhoof or fragrant resin was going to stop the relentless mechanical wear and tear caused by their staple food. At best, their tooth powders might have scrubbed away some superficial debris or provided a temporary feeling of freshness, but they couldn't counteract the daily grinding down of enamel. In fact, some of the coarser abrasives they used might have even contributed to enamel erosion if not used carefully, potentially making teeth more susceptible to other problems. It's a rather ironic thought, their solution possibly exacerbating the problem. What about preventing decay? While some ingredients like salt or certain resins like myrrh might have had mild antiseptic properties, they were unlikely to be potent enough or applied consistently enough to significantly inhibit the bacteria responsible for caries, especially in a mouth already compromised by attrition and a diet containing sugars from fruits and honey. Without an understanding of bacterial action or the importance of removing plaque effectively from all tooth surfaces, especially between teeth, their efforts were fighting a losing battle. They were treating symptoms or perceived causes like toothworms, a common ancient belief for the cause of cavities, rather than the actual underlying microbiology. And breath freshening, chewing on mint or myrrh, would certainly provide a temporary aromatic lift, masking underlying odors for a short period. This was probably the most successful aspect of their oral care, at least in terms of immediate sensory perception. If your goal was to not offend the person you were speaking to for the next half hour, these methods might have offered some fleeting assistance, but they wouldn't address the root causes of bad breath, such as gum disease or decaying food particles trapped between worn-down teeth. The magical incantations and appeals to the gods, while profoundly important for psychological well-being and providing a framework for understanding and coping with suffering, their direct impact on dental pathology was, from a purely scientific standpoint, negligible. The comfort and hope they provided were real, but they wouldn't stop an abscess from forming or a tooth from decaying. Quirky tidbit: the placebo effect is a powerful phenomenon, and the belief that a ritual or divine intervention was working could genuinely make a sufferer feel better, even if the underlying physical condition remained unchanged. This psychological aspect of ancient medicine is crucial to understanding its role in society. It's a subject of ongoing research and debate among specialists whether certain specific ingredients or practices offered any marginal benefits that we might not fully appreciate. For instance, were certain plant extracts more effective as anti-inflammatories than currently recognized? Did some of their abrasive powders, when ground to a very specific fineness, achieve a polishing effect without excessive damage? These are nuanced questions that require careful analysis of archaeological and textual evidence. However, the overwhelming picture painted by the skeletal remains is one of widespread dental suffering. So, was it all for nothing? Not entirely. The intent was there, a clear desire for cleanliness, for relief from pain, for social acceptance. Their efforts represent a fascinating chapter in the human struggle against disease and discomfort, using the knowledge and resources available to them at the time. They were observing, experimenting, and trying to make sense of their world and their bodies. Their tooth powders and oral hygiene practices, however ineffective by modern standards, show ingenuity and a relatable human concern. They may not have achieved gleaming, healthy smiles, but they laid some of the earliest groundwork for what would eventually, millennia later, evolve into modern dentistry. In a way, their failures are as instructive as any successes they might have had. They highlight the importance of scientific understanding in tackling health problems. Without knowing the true nature of bacteria or the mechanics of tooth decay or the long-term effects of abrasion, their solutions were, at best, stabs in the dark, sometimes fragrant, sometimes gritty, but ultimately unable to conquer the dental demons of ancient Egypt. So as you drift off, you can perhaps appreciate the irony. All that effort, all those strange ingredients, and still, the toothache probably reigned supreme. So, here we are, at the end of our rather gritty and occasionally fragrant journey through the world of ancient Egyptian dental care. We've imagined the taste of sandy bread, the feel of a frayed twig against our teeth, the dubious aroma of burnt ox hooves, and the hopeful whisper of a prayer to Isis for a moment's peace from a throbbing jaw. We've seen that despite their best intentions and ingenious, if sometimes alarming concoctions, the ancient Egyptians largely fought a losing battle against dental woes. Their story is a testament to human resilience and the enduring quest for comfort and cleanliness, even when armed with little more than hope and a handful of powdered, well, you know. As the light of your modern day fades, or perhaps as the pre-dawn quiet of your own time zone settles around you, let your mind drift back one last time to those banks of the Nile. Picture the vast expanse of the desert stretching out beyond the fertile strip, the monumental pyramids piercing the clear sky, and the millions of souls who lived, loved, toiled, and, yes, suffered with toothaches beneath that same sun that warms your world today. Their lives were so different, yet their human experiences, the desire for relief from pain, the wish to present a pleasant face to the world, the need to make sense of their physical ailments, resonate across the millennia. Mainstream, historical fact. The legacy of ancient Egypt extends far beyond its monuments. Its contributions to writing, mathematics, medicine, however rudimentary by modern standards, and art laid foundational elements for subsequent civilizations, including those in the classical world. Even their fumbling attempts at oral hygiene are part of that vast human experiment, a tiny thread in the rich tapestry of our shared past. You can almost feel the gentle rocking of a felucca on the Nile, the soft breeze carrying the scent of lotus and river mud. The sounds of the ancient world are fading now, the distant chanting from a temple, the chatter of a bustling marketplace, the rhythmic thump of a pestle grinding grain, and with it, a little bit of sand. It all recedes, like the tide, into the quietude of history. Quirky tidbit. One of the earliest known individuals named as a dentist is Hesi-Ra, an Egyptian high official who lived around 2600 BC. His tomb inscriptions include titles like Chief of Dentists and Physicians, suggesting some level of specialization in dental issues, even if the treatments were very different from what we know today. Imagine Hesi-Ra contemplating a particularly troublesome royal molar, perhaps with a poultice of myrrh and a hopeful incantation at the ready. His challenges were immense, his tools simple, but his dedication to alleviating suffering was likely as earnest as any modern practitioner. The details of how he, and others like him, practiced their craft remain largely a mystery, a subject of ongoing scholarly fascination, much like the precise recipes for the most effective, or least offensive, tooth powders. The ancient Egyptians faced their dental demons with a characteristic blend of pragmatism, ritual, and a deep connection to their environment. They used what they had, the plants of the riverbank, the minerals of the desert, the byproducts of their daily lives, in ways that made sense to them, within their framework of understanding the world. their failures to conquer tooth decay, and gum disease are not a judgment on their intelligence or their ingenuity, but rather a reflection of the universal human condition before the dawn of scientific dentistry. And so, as you let these ancient scenes dissolve, as the concerns of pharaohs and farmers fade into the mists of time, perhaps you can carry with you a renewed appreciation for the simple comforts of your own era. That soft bristled toothbrush, the minty freshness of your chosen paste, the easy access to skilled dental care. These are luxuries that would have seemed like unimaginable magic to even the wealthiest Egyptian noble. Tonight, we've walked a mile, or perhaps a few millennia, in their sandals, and tasted, metaphorically at least, the grit of their daily lives. We've explored their rather brave, if ultimately flawed, attempts to keep their smiles bright, or at least their breath bearable. The night is deep now. The world outside your window is quiet. Let the stories of ancient Egypt, with their strange dental remedies and their very human struggles, become a soft, distant murmur. There are no more gritty concoctions to consider, no more aching teeth to contemplate, only the gentle pull of slumber. The quest for clean teeth in the land of the pharaohs is over for tonight. You can rest now, knowing that your own dental care routine is, thankfully, a world away from powdered oxhoof and fervent, desperate prayers over a sore gum. The day is done. The stories have been told. Allow yourself to drift, to float, to sink into a deep and peaceful rest, leaving the dust and deserts of ancient Egypt far behind. The soft glow of the oil lamps in ancient mud brick homes has long since flickered out, and the grand temples stand silent under a canopy of stars that have witnessed civilizations rise and fall. The concerns of gritty bread and aching teeth have dissolved into the vast stillness of the past, becoming mere whispers carried on the desert wind. You can let go now of these ancient tales, allowing the gentle cadence of the story to become a soft, rhythmic wave, lulling you further and further into tranquility. There is nothing more to learn tonight, nothing more to explore, only the profound peace of approaching sleep. Feel the comfort of your own bed, the quiet of your own space, a sanctuary far removed from the toil and troubles of bygone eras. The challenges of ancient dental hygiene, with their curious and sometimes alarming remedies, can fade completely from your mind, leaving only a sense of calm and a deeper appreciation for the simple ease of your own time. Let your breathing slow, deepen, and become as regular as the gentle lapping of the Nile against its banks in the quietest hour of the night. Every thought can now soften, every muscle can relax, as you allow yourself to be carried effortlessly towards the shores of dreamland, where history rests and only peaceful slumber awaits.